Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to go over this box right here. This is my Ned Rig jig head box. You know, it's got a variety of different Z-Man Ned Rig jig heads in here, and you know, Z-Man has really just put a lot of energy into creating the Ned Rig system and making every single component perfect for every situation. You've got a bunch of different styles of elastic baits in the Ned Rig system, and of course you've got a bunch of different jig heads to fit every situation. Now, although I use pretty much every single jig head that Z-Man makes for the Ned Rig system, I'm just going to go over several of them that I use the majority of the time. So let's start out with one of my absolute favorites. Now one of the biggest complaints that people had about the Ned Rig jig heads that originally came out, the original Finesse Shrooms jig head, was that it had a lighter wire hook. Now, for people that don't have a lot of experience with finesse tactics and using ultra light line and light tackle in general, that could be a problem. You know, if you don't have your drag set right, or you're using like braid or too heavy of gear, you could straighten out that hook pretty easy. So Z-Man wanted to cater to those people that still wanted to use heavier tackle, fish it around heavier cover, and so they came out with this one right here. This right here is the Nedlox jig head. This is an excellent jig head. It's still got a very small hook to it, so it's a small profile hook, but it's a much stronger hook, and it's got a little bit different molded on bait keeper. Works really well, and overall I love the head design. It's very similar to the original Finesse Rooms, and it's just a heavier version of that original Finesse Rooms jig head. And what I really like this, and it's going to start raining right here, but what I really love about this jig head right here is the fact that I can use it around heavier cover. So anytime I'm fishing around brush, or you know, laydowns, or very light vegetation, this is going to be my go-to. And I actually did a video on how I Texas rig my Ned Rigs to bring it through cover, and this is one of the most common jig heads that I'm going to be using when I Texas rig my Ned Rig system like that. I've caught a lot of fish around a lot of cover. You can upsize your line. Instead of using 4 and 6 pound tests, with this you can use 10 and even 12 pound tests, and as long as you got your drag set right, this hook is just not going to bend out, and you're not going to have any issues like you would with a lighter wire hook. So this is a really good one. The Nedlox is one of my favorites, and it's also a really good all-around one too, and works perfect with some of the smaller Ned Rig baits, such as, you know, the ticklers, the Finesse TRD, the you know, hula sticks. All of those are going to work really well with this. So any of the smaller profile ones, really good jig head. All right, let's move on. So now that we've already talked a little bit about the Finesse Shrooms jig head, let's talk about it, because it's still one of my absolute favorite jig heads in the Ned Rig system. I actually use this one quite a bit. You know, I'd say the only other one that competes with the amount of time that I use it is the Nedlox that we just talked about. But the Finesse Rooms is still one of my favorites. And I tell you what, the majority of the time that I'm fishing the Ned Rig with an exposed hook, that's when I'm going to be using the Finesse Rooms. It's just a really killer jig head. It's got that welded on wire keeper, which I think is the absolute best for Elastec baits, especially when you're just putting that bait on the hook and you've got the hook exposed. It just seems to work extremely well, keeping that bait locked on. And this is especially my favorite for fishing for spots and smallmouth. Spots and smallmouth, especially smallmouth. When I go up north and fish for smallmouth, whether it's shallow or deep, this is a really good one, because sometimes you know, I don't quite catch the bite right off the bat, and I just kind of feel a little bit of sponginess. And even if they kind of get the jump on me and catch me by surprise, the hook is so light wire and super sharp that I can really get a good hook set, even if I'm surprised by them and I just barely get a good hook set. Even in deep water, especially in deep water, this is a really good option because sometimes with a heavier wire hook, you're going to have a real problem getting a good solid hook set if they catch you by surprise. So a really good one for fishing for smallmouth spots, or anytime you're really trying to be finessey. This is a really good one. All right, so the next one is another one that's kind of fairly new. This one right here is the Pro Shrooms from Z-Man. The Pro Shrooms is very similar to the original Finesse Rooms jig head. Again, because of the feedback of people wanting a heavier wire hook, they designed this one. It is a bigger hook than you would see on the Nedlox, but a similar gauge wire. So it's a really strong hook overall, very sharp, and it's got a little bit of a wider gap to it. So it is definitely made for slightly larger baits. It's not really my first choice for like the Finesse TRDs or the ticklers. Those I'm going to be using either the Nedlox, the Finesse Bullets, which we're going to be talking about, and also the Finesse TRD. But things like the hula sticks that are a little bit bigger, a big TRD, this is one of my favorites to use for that if I'm just using an exposed jig head, and some of the Ned Rig baits that are a little bit bigger. Another one is the baby goats. This one actually works really well with that. But this is a really, really good one. Again, if you're fishing around heavier cover and you're using baits that are just a little bit bigger, or you're trying to Texas rig some of those slightly larger Ned Rig Elastec baits, this is a really good hook. I've caught a lot of fish on this. This is one of my favorite for fishing for largemouth, especially bigger largemouth. Again, using heavier tackle. This one especially, I'm going to be using, 12-pound test, something in that range. This is going to be one of those that I'm going to be using heavier line. All right, finally, we've got the Finesse Bullets. This one is very, very unique. It's not designed to be a exposed jig head. It's actually designed to be Texas rigged, but it's even more unique than that. The design, you've got this little bullet weight style head on the front, and then you've also got this dispersed weight on the shank of the hook. So what this really does well, and it's pretty cool, and I pretty much use it for just kind of those creature style Elastec Ned Rig baits, such as the TRD hogs here. What it does really, really well, it's really cool, is if you're fishing around a crawfish spawn or something like that where there's a lot of crawfish on the bottom, that's what the fish are feeding on. This is a really good hook option for those baits that look like crawfish. TRD craws, the TRD hogs, these are going to work really well. But what it does is essentially you've got it rigged, Texas rig like that, so it's completely weedless. But what it does is it puts that bait on the bottom in a defensive posture. And so you can just drag it on the bottom, hop it on the bottom, and it's going to put those claws, instead of being completely upright, it's actually going to be at like a 45-degree angle, keeping those claws, those appendages pointed in that very natural way that a crawfish would position itself in a defensive manner. So it is a really, really cool jig head that if you're fishing for fish that are feeding heavily on very small crawfish, this is the one. The Finesse Bullets is really, really good for that. So those are the 4 jig heads that I use the majority of the time, and I'm pretty much excluding some of the bigger Ned Rig options, such as the big TRD and the giant TRD. I can talk about those later. I use different jig heads for some of those, and overall I have a whole other set of jig heads that I use for those baits. So maybe we can talk about the bigger Ned Rig options at another time, but those are the most common jig heads that I use for all the different situations that I face fishing around the country. So hopefully this helps. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. If you have any comments, drop a comment below. I'm going to see you guys out on the water. Take care.